So Matthew is basically is overseeing the Eisenhower Media Network these days, which is great. Um, Many veterans who have spoken out against war, among other things. And anytime you have an opportunity to speak to the UN, it's kind of a big deal, even though it doesn't
Yes.
seem like the UN is really doing much of
I
anything
feel
these
so
days.
like, I don't want to say proud. That seems kind of condescending, but like, I am so inspired by Matthew, and I am very grateful and thankful that he is someone that I have as a friend. Like he's a very inspired person, like very inspiring person.
Here we go.
As a way of introduction, I'm a U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran of the Iraq War. In 2009, I was a political officer with the U.S. State Department in Afghanistan. I resigned my position over the escalation of that war. I have been a direct participant in the violence of war. I know its moral wickedness. I know its intellectual dishonesty. And that's why I sit here today with a white poppy on my lapel to remember and to represent all the victims of war. In the past 30 years, the number of nuclear-armed nations has grown. Arms treaties have been broken, including unilaterally and without merit by my own country. Modernization of nuclear forces by all parties has greatly increased the destructive capability of missile and bomber fleets. So that even though the numbers and yields of nuclear weapons have diminished, improved accuracy has increased the destructive power of those fleets. There are warheads designated as usable nuclear weapons. Disturbingly, we have generals, diplomats, and politicians who believe such things exist.
Part of the reason that is the case is because, especially at the very top, which a lot of people don't seem to talk about, is that when you're an infantry member, you're just a grunt. And this is no disrespect, but this is how they're viewed. When you're at the top, you are not just a person of immense influence, you're also somebody who has usually, and again, this is what they talk about, the revolving door of politics in Washington, D.C., a relationship, probably a very cozy one, with the military-industrial complex, whether it's weapons manufacturers, whether it's, it could be aircraft carriers, it could be anything. And it's very easy to see why creating weapons, especially real weapons of mass destruction, is a huge commodity business. That's why this is such a crisis. Not because there's like this different sense of philosophy in terms of how things should be done when it comes to war. It's not. What we're looking at here is a situation where somebody like Matthew, who knows what it's like to be on the front lines and to see exactly what this is all about, and the people who typically are in favor of it are the ones who never see front.
Well, and he knows it's all based on lies. He knows that it's all based on lies, and that and when you say grunts, it's like they're literally thought of as fodder. All right, yeah. Continue, because I haven't seen the whole thing.
The dissolution of arms control talks following the abrogation of the treaties leaves us with nuclear armed powers that not only do not have the mechanisms to restart talks, but also do not have the means to talk even during a crisis. That speaks nothing of the lack of political will or the immense mistrust between the nuclear powers. I have been speaking of the nuclear weapons at the top rung of the escalation ladder. Today, it is the weapons being used in Ukraine that are leading us to that top rung, which is an apocalyptic point of no return. The U.S. and NATO strategy for the war in Ukraine has been two-pronged, economic and military. Neither have worked and neither will work. As the strategy has failed, it has not been revisited, replaced, or remanded, but reinforced. Thus, we have seen a steady wave of escalation for 2 years. The U.S. and its allies never considered diplomacy a needed third prong, which should have been the primary and dominant effort. Diplomacy was openly disparaged and repudiated. This was appalling diplomatic malpractice. And now, as a consequence, we sit here today as the killing, the destruction, and the suffering enter their 26th month.
26 months.
And by the way, people like Matthew and the Eisenhower Network people and other people that have been on here, they've been saying it since the beginning, that this was not a winnable thing, that this was never, like, this isn't like all of a sudden we're now realizing that this was not a good plan. These same people have been saying it the entire time. the entire time. Because why? Because they knew about what the context was prior to that, and that this would inevitably be the result of a whole bunch of other things that were not handled before Russia invaded Ukraine. So these are the people that already knew, they knew ahead of time that this would be exactly where this is. And yet it's just, it's crazy to me that more people don't realize that the same people have been saying the same thing. It's like wash, rinse, repeat over and over again. It's very frustrating.
I do not condone or support Russia's invasion. Although provoked, it is a preemptive war that violates international law and is a strategic error. However, it must be noted that Russia attempted negotiations in 2021, 2022, and 2023, efforts that may have prevented, concluded, or frozen this war if those diplomatic offers have been responded to in kind. This war is a brutal and unwinnable meat grinder. The toll is shocking and disgusting. It is a moral horror. Hundreds of thousands of casualties and 10 million refugees, incalculable environmental and infrastructure damage. Eastern Ukraine is a land depopulated, devastated, and destroyed. Its fields and towns are saturated with mines and unexploded ordnance, and the toxic residue of modern war poisons its air, land, and water. Generations of unborn Ukrainians will pay for this war, either in land made uninhabitable or through mothers who give birth to dead, deformed, and disabled babies. Ask the representatives here from Iraq, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and other nations if you believe war ever comes to an end. I believe the representative from Algeria can tell you about what landmines do to a people and a land. The escalatory trajectory of this war points to a risk greater than anyone should be willing to accept. This institution must do everything in its power to preclude any further escalation of this war, and everything possible to force a ceasefire and initiate a political process for a lasting peace. If a ban on the transfer of weapons and munitions into this war is what is needed to force a ceasefire negotiations, then so it must be. This Security Council must accept the responsibility of this moment and act to end this existential peril we face. Finally, I wish to make a plea to abolish the UN Security Council veto. Whatever justifications the veto may have had, specious and self-serving as they often were, the ongoing genocide in Gaza has forever nullified such arguments. Claims made at this table that to protect civilian lives, ceasefire resolutions must be vetoed are as Orwellian as the assertions made in Washington, D.C. and Tel Aviv that genocide is self-defense. As the Palestinian people are being defiled and destroyed, for 5 months the U.S. has defied the world, providing diplomatic cover and unlimited military assistance to Israel as it carries out its unholy genocide in Palestine. In order for this institution to honor its founding commitments and principles, the permanent member veto must be abolished. Never again should a nation be able to protect occupation, oppression, apartheid, and genocide.
Wow. That's power.
I really did not think I could love him more. I really, like, this is really like,
And again, coming from somebody who actually served on the front lines and may very well have taken lives.
well, it's not,
So-
it just seemed really horrible things, and just knows that it's to no good end. There's no end that wins. Like, there's no winner.
But again, it's like everyone with the Ukraine flag in their bio. These are people who would never in a million years pick up a weapon and go to the front lines in Kiev and fight.
But
They
this was
wouldn't.
never winnable. This was never going to go any other way than this.
It
It's
was
just so
always. It's
frustrating.
always so easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy to wave your stupid flag and act like you care when in reality you have nothing to lose.
All right, finish it. Is it done? Finish it. I think
We're done.
we're done. Unbelievable. He's so awesome.